So please make sure that you do fill out the awards nomination forms. And for those of you guys like, but like all at interns or like, it's especially important that we make sure that folks are there. Like we won't be able to give them physically their gifts and stuff. But I'm going to try to get the gifts ready and made so that, you know, they can pick them up whenever over the summer or when the stay-at-home order is done. Okay. All right. I'm going to answer Amanda's question, but if anybody else has other questions for me before I dish back to John, please write them real quick. So for IB workshops for the summer, so we're in a little bit of a weird spot. The district has kind of said that we cannot spend any money that is non-essential. And so for example, right, of the expenditures that I've tried to push through, right, the one that didn't go through was trying to pay for manage back for next year, right? Like trying to pay, like typically I pay in advance for manage back for the coming year. And they wouldn't even let me do that, right? So it's a little bit of a iffy situation. But I think we'll be able to get people signed up at least for the online versions of the workshops that they have to be at. So when I say have to be at, I essentially mean DP workshops. So like DP courses that we are teaching that people need to have been to the workshop before they teach, those are the ones that we're probably going to be able to push through. Everything else will likely have to wait. And for those workshops, they're obviously going to be the online version, which you can ask John about. You can ask, I think Jeremy has taken one. I think Tom's taken one. I know Matt's taken one for sure. I think Matt's taken a couple actually. So if you're curious about like how those online workshops work, there's several people on staff who've been to one. Okay. Any other questions for me before I mute myself?
On the survey, the additional storage, does that mean any like equipment, or is that just like, I don't know, could you just clarify what?
Yeah, no, you guys obviously it's like a little bit of a different story for you and Matt, you and Jeremy and Matt. So I would say that like the ethos of it for everybody, and this does apply to you guys, is like basically try to like put everything away so that there's no like stuff loose on surfaces. But for like the big equipment, I think I don't have any idea of how they're going to do the deep clean. So I think the important thing there is just like kind of checking it with Brenda directly and being like, hey, what exactly are you guys going to do? What do you need me to do to the, I imagine you're talking particularly about like the 3D printer, the CNC, and the laser cutter, right? Sorry, Tom, you're on mute.
Yeah, the table saw, the stuff that really doesn't fit into a cabinet anywhere.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
Yes, the CNC stuff like that. I
mean,
that's, yeah.
It might make sense to like cover it in whatever way that you would normally do that, but I think that's like a conversation to have directly with Brenda, because I have no idea how they're going to do the deep clean or what they're going to do differently. So maybe like I can text you her number too, and you can just call her.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions for me? I think Amanda, looks like Sarah responded to your question. So, and then John, do you need me to say anything more than what I just said about classroom clean out, or?
I don't think so.
Okay. I mean,
I'm sure people will probably have questions. But
do you mind just pulling up the form real quick, because they might not know they have questions, they might not have seen it yet, and then I'll just real quick walk them through it. Like the gist of this, guys, is that the district was like, hey, you get at least this much time to do it, right? I think that's like the bargaining part of it, right? But the reality is like we know that people have differentiated needs, right? So like you might need 4 days, you might need 6 days to clean out your stuff, right? Like especially if you're like an art teacher, or design teacher, or music teacher, or whatever. And so we want to make sure that we're giving people the time they need, and also differentiating for like, like personally, if you are feeling not comfortable coming in on a day or at a time, when other people are in the building, like just let me know and we can arrange for like doing that on a weekend or something like that when you can just kind of have the space to yourself. Obviously with reason, right? There's many people on our staff who that's very reasonable of a request. So that's what we're asking for, like the time needed. Also, if you don't need a lot of time, we can schedule that and be super quick about it. I realize now we should have added like a days I definitely can't do. And so maybe you can just include that at the very end, because I am going to basically schedule you guys once I get your responses. I do want to know what rooms you need to get into. So like if you need to get into a room that isn't your classroom, it's helpful for us to know that so that we don't schedule people and they're overlapping. And the other big thing that we asked was like, if you have stuff in your locker that you feel comfortable with us just taking out and putting into your classroom, that's helpful because then it takes away the need for people to go into the staff lounge and overlap with each other in the staff lounge. And then the last thing Tom already mentioned, which is like if you need space to put stuff that would otherwise be loose in your room, and I am even including books there, right? So if you have books that don't fit on a shelf and also don't fit in your shelving stuff, like I don't want us to be leaving books stacked in places. So if you have anything that would be loose, right, make sure you include that in the additional storage part. And if it's like personal stuff, we'll probably ask you to take it home. But like if it's like an iguana cage, right, like that's like a little bit tough to do. So so certainly we wouldn't ask you, sorry, not cage, John, enclosure. Then if that makes sense. Okay. Is there anything else on there that needs explanation, John, you think? Oh, the comfort level, again, that's like again, if you're like somebody who is, that I don't already know, that's like kind of in a sticky situation in terms of your home situation, or in terms of your own health, right? Just note it there, and I'll make sure that when we schedule you when there's like less people there, or when there's like nobody else on your floor, or, you know, if it really needs, like if you really don't want to be around people, especially if you're in the main office, like our sped team and Mia, right? Like just let me know, and like again, like I'm happy to open the building up on a weekend or at night. Okay? Because the last thing we want is for anybody to be stressed out more than needs to be by this situation. So cool. Thanks.
I came in a little late. Just a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead, Robin.
So are we allowed? So we are allowed to put things in our cabinets? Or?
Yeah, exactly. So we don't want to do anything complicated, right? So essentially what we're asking you guys to do is just put stuff away in your current room. And, you know, obviously next year, again, we'll be sharing rooms, but don't worry about that right now. Just put stuff away, and then we can reorganize and, you know, run around in the fall when hopefully things are a little bit safer and more secure,
Okay.
or over the summer if need be. Okay. But the priority is kind of getting everything cleared out so that Brenda and the team can kind of go through and just deep clean and sanitize and like make sure that, you know, it's like a reset kind of thing. Okay, anything else? All right, cool. I'm going to go on mute, but I'll be here. So if anybody has questions as we go, feel free to ask.
Awesome. So I think the first thing that people prioritized here was preparing for the fall, which of course goes hand in hand with, you know, cleaning things out and figuring out what the next steps are for us. And I know that what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to pull some equipment for demonstrations, so that at the very least I can put together some demonstrations for students. Not a lot, because of course we'll have another opportunity, like Amir just said, over the summer, over the fall, but at least to figure out how to do this distance learning thing if we need to in the fall, with some actual manipulatives. And I know manipulatives don't necessarily apply to each of our situations, but that is something to keep in mind, especially since we don't want to be spending a lot of time at school, you know, as little as possible in order to make sure that we're all safe. So, and I have gotten a couple questions about if distance learning continues, how best to manipulate our home environments to make sure that we are giving the best experience to the students. And I can formalize this a little bit more, but I can give you what my recommendations are, but I would also like to hear, especially from George to go. Where are you, George, today? And Tom, and anyone who has experience with just video broadcasting, anything else, like what the best situation is for your broadcast. I recommend highly having at least 2 devices. That's my first item, having something for either a webcam attached to your computer or a completely separate computer, so that you can do like I'm doing, where I'm dialing in on 2 computers. So over here, there on my right, I've got this demonstration going on for refraction. All right, it's really cool because you put the chopstick in the water, and the chopstick looks like it's bent, and it's really fun. And then there's colors, and so yay, demonstration. But this, having the laptop here to my right, allows me to then have this separate broadcast and do something over here. Some folks like to have essentially a document camera. You can use your phone as a document camera, and you can dial your phone into Zoom and have not only your main video going, but also that document camera off to your right or left, so that you can demonstrate some paper things, or if you want to do some drawing. I know Josie has a stylus that he uses that does a really good job, but you don't necessarily have to invest in that hardware. You can still do a lot with pen and paper, a small dry erase board, just by using multiple devices. So making sure that you have multiple devices and or a webcam can be really helpful. Obviously headphones, gaming headphones is kind of an ideal, where you've got the microphone that's attached to those headphones. Comfort is really important. You want to make sure they're comfortable for your head as much as possible, but gaming headphones are a very good investment, and you don't have to spend that much to get a decent pair. I was also going to mention lighting. So one of the things that I have is this workshop light. It's got a fairly bright bulb in it, but it's also a cool bulb because it's LED. And so I wanted to show you the difference. If I actually bounce this light off the walls, it lights my face pretty well, and it keeps the light levels pretty even throughout the room, so that students can see my face, so that I'm not dark in relation to something else that's in the room. I also make sure that I have all diffuse sources of light. There's no window behind me. There's no light bulb that's in frame, because that will change the contrast on your video really quickly. Webcams are typically not that great, so they're not going to be able to change the lighting conditions in order to maximize how your face looks versus the rest of the picture. So finding a space in your house that has where you can avoid any of those direct sources of light, and like I said, adding some sort of fill light like this helps to create a softer picture. It's just better for recording. It's better for students to see you and your expressions, and helps you make those connections. And like I said, it's like a $10 shop light and a $5 to $10 bulb. So if you don't have one around, it works really well. And it also works really well for like my demonstration over here. How about, well, I have a couple other recommendations. Those are my big ones. Has anyone come across specific things that really help their environment, that really help them to do broadcasts with kids? Tom says that he often screencasted what he was demonstrating on his computer and then had spliced in other videos using video editing software. Can I ask what video editing software you're using for that? And also feel free to chime in. I'm muting. Go ahead.
Whatever, you know, whatever's free and available. I mean, there's a couple online that I've used in the past. I can look and see what those are. iMovie works fine. Windows
Movie Maker?
Movie Maker, you know, I've used that. It really depends on what you have available. You can do it with PowerPoint as well. Just export it as a MP4. And that's the big thing. You know, if you import it into something and then exporting it as an MP4, then people can access it.
So what Tom just mentioned might not make sense to you. You might not be familiar with those abbreviations or those formats. I'm more than happy to put together, or if Tom, you could put together, you know, a quick tutorial about how to do that with PowerPoint, because I think, or Google Slides actually will also do that. I think. I got to check on that. But I know you can do it, like you said, with PowerPoint, being able to export as an MP4, which is a video file. And that could be a really great way to make videos easily from your presentations. And Amir says Adobe Spark is pretty easy and intuitive. So if you guys are interested in any of these, it seems like that would be a good topic for next week or the week after. Any other tips, suggestions about filming, about creating a space? Okay. I've also been asked about software, the best software to have, and I think that's almost completely personal. I feel like, you know, if you're planning on investing in some pieces of software in order to help you do online learning, there's almost always a free trial, like a week-long trial or a month-long trial. Do that, and of course set yourself a reminder to make sure that you cancel it if you don't like it. But always take advantages of those trials, because they give you full features so that you can play around with it and see if it's something that you actually want to use in your classroom. I hesitate making very specific recommendations for things because it comes down to what your individual comfort level is, and also your discipline, because it's going to vary from class to class. I would say that you really want to make sure that you are using Google Suite, G Suite, as much as possible, because G Suite is capable of doing most of what you need to do. It might not be the perfect solution, but kids can log into it. It can all integrate with everything that you're doing. It's all contained within Classroom. And so because we have an inherent advantage using anything G Suite, I would always make a recommendation to explore what you can in G Suite first, and then look for some outside app or piece of software to do what you're trying to do. Other questions or comments about this? And Amanda did point out that you can insert your voice narrations in PowerPoint and do it slide by slide. It is very nice. And then the finished product actually is a complete video. And talking about what's better live and what's better asynchronous, I think is a great topic. Other questions, comments, suggestions, recommendations? Has anyone found a really good app, a deal breaker app that they're like, I have to have this, I use this every day? If you do, throw it in the chat. as we go along. The next thing that folks said that they really wanted to address were these CMSD videos. I sent this to some of you because I know that you are you're doing a lot of different ideas and a lot of different productions in your classroom sessions. And so I was contacted by one of the members who is running the WUAB sessions that are daily. So our day as high school is on Thursdays. And she reached out to me to ask whether I wanted to put together, or other folks wanted to put together, other folks at campus wanted to put together some videos for broadcast. And I haven't gotten a response yet about my specific questions about like, how long should these videos be, any particular content areas that you're looking for, just looking for some more specifics so that I know what sorts of things to put together. These will be edited by CMSD before broadcast, so you don't have anything to worry about. It's not just gonna automatically go out into the ether. And so these are opportunities, obviously, for us as educators to show what we're doing in our classrooms, and more broadly for us as Campus International to show the amazing things that we're doing as campus at this time, building upon all the other incredible stuff that we do. So I strongly recommend that you take advantage of it. I personally am thinking of this as like 5 to 10 minute lessons because awesome, because like the 1 hour time frame that we have to broadcast, I feel like they're wanting to hit as many different subjects as possible with enough fidelity. So if you have any ideas as well, if you're like, it's not for me, but I think it would be really cool to do a lesson on such and such. Oh, thank you, Sarah. Then please let us know. Talk to folks. I can be a clearinghouse if you want me to send things over to Rita, who's Rita Makita is handling all this at MC Squared STEM. So just let me know, and I'd be more than happy to either ask more questions or send along any videos that you put together, any lessons that you put together. All right? Or if we wanted a collaboration among multiple teachers, put together a lesson, I think that would work really well. All right? All right, bye Josie, good to see you. The next thing I wanted to cover was something I started last week, and that was the formulas for Google Sheets. I plan on also addressing, actually let me do this first, the Google Classroom stuff, how to set up a new class, and something that you may want to look at for your new class with always displaying the current topic and assignment. So let's head out to Google Classroom real quick. So when you first log on to Classroom, if you don't go to a specific class, you see your whole panel of classes here. In the 3-dot menu, you have several things that you can do. So you can move, this is actually relatively new. You can move the classes around so that they can be in an order that makes the most sense to you. So I am a co-teacher on a lot of classes. And Amir, could you answer Amanda's question? So, you know, I could change the order of my classes so that all the classes that I'm teaching come first and then co-teaching come second. We can also edit the name of it, the section, the subject. One other thing that we can do is copy, and the last thing we can do is archive. So something that you may want to do if you have a class that's repeating from year to year, and you want to save all of those assignments in order to be able to assign them for the new group of students coming in the following year, is you might want to do copy. When you do a copy, it makes a complete copy of the class, but does not copy over any of the students. So this enables you to have access to all of those same assignments, all of those same, I don't think it's the announcements, but all of the same assignments, all the same materials, and be able to assign them fresh in that new year. So you don't have to redo any of your work that you assigned on Google Classroom. It's really a total boon. It's something you should take advantage of. A couple of notes about when you do this: it takes a while. This is not a priority for Google Classroom, and this is free for us. So because it's free, then Google's like, yeah, we're gonna give you some server time on the back end of things, and it'll take its time, we'll let you know. So it may take 24, sometimes longer hours for the copy of the program, of the class, to get made. And once that happens, you'll get a notification by email that the class was copied. I would strongly recommend that you combine your different sections of the class into one class, into one course. That'll make your life a lot easier. So I noticed that some of you have like a different class for period 1, period 2, period 3. And unless those are actually different courses, combine them into the same Google class. There's always ways to differentiate once you're in that class between the different periods, but it will save you having to share posts among all of those separate classes. And it just creates less overhead for you. Another thing to consider when you're making your new class, the old class you may want to archive. That way it won't appear on your screen anymore. But when you have your new class, so we'll go into this Biology 2020-2021, you may want to have a topic. This all depends on personal preference. Taking forever, so let me go to a different one. All right, you may want to have a topic that is maybe current topic or current work or current unit, or even like current classwork. And that topic is the first topic that students see. There may be some other materials or assignments here, but the first topic is what they see. And just move into current classwork as a topic, whatever the current classwork is, so that students automatically know to check that topic each and every time they log on to Classroom. I know a couple folks already do this. And then once you're done with it, you can move it back into whatever unit it was in. That way, if you've got 8 or 9 different units on your Google Classroom, students don't necessarily have to scroll all the way down to the last topic in order to see where they are. It's on you to then move it to the appropriate topic. And you don't have to actually drag it all the way to its current topic. In order to change the topic of an assignment, you can just edit it and change that topic right here. So you can move it back to whatever topic it was under really easily. And that way, on a daily basis, you're moving whatever is the current classwork up to this current classwork topic, and you're moving out whatever was previous back out. You can play around with those topics however you would like to, but this is a technique, a strategy that a lot of folks use in order to make it a better experience for the students. And I think, Robin, I addressed your question. Let me know if I didn't.
All good.
Okay. So are there any other questions about Google Classroom? Seeing lots of good stuff about teaching using technology. Thank you, Mia. Thank you, Tom. So let's hit Google Sheets, because for some of you, you may have data that you want to be able to compile for students in order to give these kind of abbreviated progress reports for Friday. So if you remember last week, I went over COUNTIF and concatenate. So just to briefly go over COUNTIF, this is a bunch of student names with their scores. And then I wanted to make a summary of how many of those students were receiving 8s, how many were receiving 4s, how many receiving 2s, and how many receiving 0s. And so in here in this cell, I started a formula by typing equals, and then I used the COUNTIF formula. The COUNTIF formula requires a range of cells and a criterion to test against. So the range of cells that I chose were the scores, and the criterion I chose to run it against was to see if it was equal to 8. Now COUNTIF can work for less than and equal to and greater than and equal to. And in fact, the example when you call up COUNTIF actually gives you that information. So let's see if I can make that appear again. There we go. So it even says this is how you would do a greater than 20. COUNTIF is really helpful for determining, getting some good data from grades, that sort of thing. And then concatenate is, as I believe was stated last week, how I do some of that magic with creating comments with students' grades. So concatenate is a way of adding together as one long string, as one long comment, both some template text and also some data from the Google Sheet itself. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying your student and then taking the information from A2, currently has a, and then the overall score is in B2 in American history. For their criterion A grade, they're currently earning A, and then C2 is criterion A right here. And it combines it all in one nice comment so that it's more, they're looking at more than just a bunch of numbers. All right, any questions so far? That was kind of a review of last week. All right, so I wanted to show you a couple other things. Depending on where you're getting your data from, you may find it helpful to do what's called a split. I'm gonna tighten this up a little bit so it appears to be bigger on your screen. So what a split does is it splits the text based on what's called a delimiter. A delimiter can be anything that separates text. So if we say equals split and then a parenthesis, the first thing that we're going to put into this formula is the text. The second thing is going to be the delimiter. There's a couple other arguments here. The split by each and remove empty text. You can look at that and see if that applies to your particular situation. I'm just going to do a simple split here, taking last name comma first name and dividing it into someone's last name and first name. So I'm going to take this cell, that's the text I'm going to split, and then the delimiter is going to be the comma. So that's what I'm going to split the text on. And when I do that, we notice a couple things. First of all, it's split Washington, comma George into last name Washington, first name George. And then I can fill this split down by holding that handle in the bottom right-hand corner. And that gives me all these names. So obviously this could be a big long list. But there's one thing about this that it may actually cause you problems later on, is that it keeps this space right here. So if all of them are separated by comma and a space, you actually want to make both the comma and the space the delimiter. If we do that, then it removes that space before the first name. And as you see, it tightens it up so that this is only the data that you want. And then we can use that concatenate to then use a student's first name, for example. So we can say concatenate is doing a great job. And now it just uses the student's first name pulled out from the full name. But the first thing that you would want to do in order to just get the first name alone is do a split. Something to watch out for is that it automatically overwrites any columns that it needs in order to split that text apart. So if you had Washington, comma, George, comma, A, then it would need 1, 2, 3 columns, and you run the risk of overwriting anything that you have in this column. So make sure that you're anticipating how many columns that you actually need. Questions about split? All right. Next one is if. And if can be really helpful for determining if a particular condition is true and doing something based on not only if it's true, but if it's false. So if, for example, we want to have a column that says danger, right? We want to say if a child has less than a 4 in a particular class, then we should warn them that they are in danger of not receiving credit if they don't complete work, right? I know 4 is a pretty high bar, but I'm choosing 4 to be the bar. And then if not, then to say that they're doing a great job, right? So here's how I'm going to do that. Is in this danger column, I'm going to type equal, that starts a function. If is the function name, and then of course start the parenthesis. So the expression that I want in this case is I want to know if their overall score is less than 4. So I'm checking to see if B2, this cell right here, is less than 4. The first thing I'm going to type is what I want to print, what I want this to say if it's true. If it's less than 4, then I want to say your child is in danger of failing. If it's false, your child is doing a great job. And then I want to type this last parenthesis to close it all up. And now it says for George Washington that your child is doing a great job. Let me go ahead and fill that down. And poor Thomas Jefferson is in danger of failing because their overall grade is less than a 4. I can combine formulas, which at this point, some of you may have already thought, well, why do I have to say your child? Why can't I use the child's first name or the child's name, right? We have the full name over here. So why don't I just say instead of your child, I'll get rid of that. And I'm going to then use a concatenate. And those of you who are pros in Excel or Google Sheets know that I don't necessarily have to use a concatenate. but that's the way I like to teach it because it makes life a little easier. And I'm going to say A2 is in danger of failing. Notice that it didn't change your child is doing a great job. But when I get down to Thomas Jefferson, it now says Thomas Jefferson is in danger of failing. So that it customizes this text so that whatever comes out is specific for the child. Any questions about using that if statement? All right, and by the way, you have access to this spreadsheet and also all the tutorials in the Google Classroom PD. The last one, and this can be helpful for reporting or for going through your own data and looking up student information very quickly. This is called VLOOKUP. And VLOOKUP stands for vertical lookup. And it's a way of looking for information that is corresponded with other information. So if we wanted to look at what Thomas Jefferson's scores were, we could use a VLOOKUP once we knew we were looking for Thomas Jefferson. So what I did is I took this same sheet, but I put a couple rows on the bottom. The first row, select a student, overall, criterion A, B, C, and D. And what I want to have happen is below, I want to be able to select a student, and then it should automatically put in what their overall grade, their criterion A grade, B, C, and D grade is. Now, you can think about this for a little while and think how you might be able to use it in your own practice. It's very helpful for being able to select certain parts of data. There's also ways to do this with pivot tables. There's other ways to accomplish this. I personally think that VLOOKUP is a really straightforward way and probably requires the least amount of overhead to do it. So the first thing that I do is for this cell right here, I'm going to do data validation. I think I've shown you data validation before, but if I go up here to data and go down to data validation, it's going to allow me to choose a range of cells in order to determine what names should be available for this selected student. So what I do is I can click on this grid that allows me to select a data range. And I'm going to select this whole column, the first 24 entries. And notice that only 4 of them are populated, but I still have 24 entries selected. That means if any other students come along, if I add any more, then they'll automatically be included in this. So I click OK, I click Save. And this dropdown now allows me to select different students. Now comes the magic with VLOOKUP. In this overall cell, I want to say equals, because that's a formula, and then VLOOKUP. Then it tells me a couple things. A search key is what I want to look for in my VLOOKUP. I'm going to be looking for this student name right here. Comma for the next argument, and I get a range. If I'm looking for the overall, all I really need to have in my range is the name of the student and that overall grade. I may want to select everything just to get in the habit of selecting everything, but all I really need are the name and the overall grade. And I'm going to make sure I select that for all potential students. The reason I'm selecting both of these is my VLOOKUP needs to be able to find this information right here and then find the corresponding information that I'm looking for. So it needs to look for the name Once it's found the name, then get the overall grade. Index is going to be the column number that I want to get back out. So this is column number 1. This is column number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I want to get column number 2 out of my data once I've found this student right here. And then this optional is sorted. I actually do want to say false. This is not sorted. Your data may be sorted. You may have all of your students in alphabetical order, in which case you could skip this. But I'm going to say false because they are not in alphabetical order. When I do that, we see that it automatically comes up with 6 for George Washington. If I change students, then it will change to whatever their grade is. So I can change it to Lincoln and Madison and everything else. So by selecting a different student, I can see what their current grades are. And I could keep this really simple and just have it be their overall grade, or I could also include criterion A, B, C, and D. I just want to show you how this works for criterion C so that you see a VLOOKUP for something that's not just the second column. So I would do VLOOKUP, same search key, which would be this name, the range. This time I want to include everything including criterion C. And then the index is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, the is sorted should be false. And this tells me that criterion C is 2. Again, when I change this, it changes along with the student. Any questions about this? Or about any Google Sheets formulas or any formulas that you would like to see or anything that you would like to know how to do? Especially in the context of progress reports. All right. So I don't want to bombard you with anything. I'll stop here unless there are any other questions. Be more than happy to stay on. I know Amanda was scooting out in preparation for the book club.
John, can I just add that it's like, so all this stuff that John just showed you is super useful for particularly if you want to do a comment for the progress report thing that we're going to ask you to do later today. And so like if you want to practice it, this is a good time to do it, especially if you have like a sheet like the one that Tom was showing us last week to like track kids' attendance and participation over these past few weeks. It could be really useful to kind of like apply some of the formulas that John's been talking about. And John, I don't know if you want to show people like your, just so they could see it in practice, like your specific interim kind of comment, like the way that populates, because I think that's like helpful to see it in practice, right? Like this kid had this many assignments out of this, you know what I mean?
Maybe. It might also be a hot mess, but.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, humor me while I find it. Some really good comments in here about the different technology. Tom, you said that we can log into Adobe using our district email and password. What all do we have access to with our district email and password, by the way?
Let me pull it up real quick. So the web-based ones that would be helpful are Spark, Lightroom if you're, for photos. There's some other mobile ones that are pretty great, like Photoshop Express, Adobe Adobe Draw, which is their Illustrator product, and Adobe for desktop. For those of you that I believe it was here. Hold on 1 second. Maybe it was web-based. Acrobat Online. So if you struggle with editing PDFs, you can use Acrobat Online. Also for signing PDFs as well. So those are the big ones. It's not the full Creative Cloud suite. There are some trials for other stuff, but the big ones are really Spark and Illustrator.
Awesome. And yeah, and those are totally free for us because of CMSD. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, because everybody I think got an email or has probably gotten an email saying like you're no longer have access to this app in Creative Cloud. So if you follow the link to the Creative Cloud from there, it'll take you to the login page, and you just put in your district email and then password, just like you would for Workday, and you can access the online apps or download any of the desktop apps or mobile apps.
Awesome. I've found a couple of my sheets that I think are accessible for showing, but here's something that I used for just figuring out overall attendance. So make that bigger. No, okay. So you see I did a concatenate here. And then inside of that, I did a round, which mathematically rounds a computation. And this says for the student how many times they've been tardy, how many times they've been absent, and then calculates a percentage for their attendance. And so in order to calculate that percentage, I rounded a multiplication times 100. This is a decimal, multiplied it by 100, and I rounded it to 0 places. So that gave me an integer percentage. And then as I showed you concatenate, I just did concatenate for the rest of it. So that's a really fairly straightforward way of using data, turning it into a comment so that it's human readable as opposed to just like a bunch of letters. All right. So if you have any more questions, suggestions, I have a bunch of ideas now for next week, going over how to make videos from PowerPoints, going over some of this Adobe stuff, that especially with signing PDFs, that sort of thing is very helpful. So if you have any other suggestions, questions, or comments, please let me know. If otherwise, have a wonderful week. It's supposed to warm up. No more freezy. Stay healthy, stay safe.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, John.
Bye, George.